Hello, my name is Mike Geig, and welcome to my video on the ListBox control, which is part of my series on Windows programming with C#. If you've done a lot of programming or any programming in the past, you might be familiar with something called a list, which is basically a common collection. And a list basically is a collection of items, very much like an array. Well, in Windows programming, we have a control called the ListBox, which is effectively both a collection and a visual component that allows us to see this collection of items. All right, you can think of it as a multi-line text box maybe, or a drop-down box, how they all have collections. This ListBox will have a very similar collection. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add one to my form here. I'm going to go to Toolbar, and I'm going to find the ListBox control. And we'll just add that to our form here. Now there's a couple of things I can do. First off, I'm going to size it up. And then I can actually preemptively add items to this. First I'm going to change the name to be my list. And I'm going to click up here. First we can data bind it to like a database or data source. We're not going to do that right now. But I can click edit items and we'll just put some names. Mike, John, Carter, Kyle, James, whatever. But you can see we have these items in the list box, and I can click this, run it, and you can see we can select these names. We can't enter anything new, but we can select the names. Okay, and so we're able to visually see the items that are inside this list box. That in and of itself is pretty cool, but we can take this just so much further. There's so much more stuff we can do. For instance, let me go ahead and bring this up a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and add a label and drag it down here. We'll call it LBL name. And then I'm going to double click inside my list box, and we see my list selected, index changed. Alright, basically what that says is every time we click something in that list box, we click an item, this event gets fired off because the index of the selected item is changing. I believe the index starts at a -1 because nothing is currently selected, and then the second you select something, it gets changed to whatever that is. Just like an array, the indexes are 0 based, so the first item will have an index of 0 and then onward. And so we can do stuff with this. So let's go ahead and say, let's say when we select index change, I'm going to do label name dot text will equal my list dot selected item dot toString, just like that. And I'll go ahead and run it. You'll see right now nothing is selected, so that event hasn't run. I believe the index selected right now is like a -1 because there's nothing there, and label says label. But as soon as I click on a name, that event handler fires off and changes the item, or changes the label to be the name of that item. Okay. So far so good. We can do some cool stuff like that. We can also get more dynamically integrated. For instance, I'm going to go ahead, I'll leave this label here. I'm going to come up here and I'm going to edit items. I'm going to remove everything in there. So no new items. And I'll bring this up a little bit, maybe make my form a little bit longer. And I will add a button and a text box. Alright. And we'll make the button say add. We'll call it btn add. Text box will be txt name. Okay, and so now what I want to do is every time someone types in here and clicks add, we're going to take the contents of this text box, we're going to put it in this list. So I'll double click here, and now I'm going to say my list dot items dot add. Right? Items is the collection of whatever's inside this list. So if I did my list dot, you're looking at the properties and everything of the list itself. If I do my list dot items, now we're looking at the properties and availability methods of the items collection. All right. In this case, we're going to say add, and we're going to put inside there txt name dot text, just like that. and then we'll leave this the same. So when you select one, it'll appear there. So I'm going to say Mike. I will say John. I will say Kara. All right, and then as I select them, we have the name changing down here. Okay. It's also probably a good idea to, after we do that, to do text name dot text equals nothing. That way, for instance, if I were to say Mike and then hit add, then I don't have to delete Mike out of there. It just blanks itself out. Okay, cool. So we can see that we can dynamically add elements to this list. We can also dynamically pull elements from the list, retrieve by retrieving items from the list, and we can also delete them from the list based on both their name and based on their index. All right. So let's go ahead and what we'll say is we will add 2 more text boxes. And actually, first I'm gonna give this some default values. There you go. Just so I don't have to keep adding stuff in there. And then what I want to do is I want to go to my toolbox. I'm going to add 2 more buttons and 2 more text boxes. All right. And bear with me here while I format all this. It's not going to look pretty, but whatever. I'm not out to win any awards here. And so this button is going to be delete. We'll just make them both say delete. And this text box is going to be, oops, did not mean to double click in there. This text box is going to be txt by index and txt by name. All right, so basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to give the user the option to delete items from this list box, whether they know the actual text of the item or whether they know the index. All right, so we'll start with the index right here. So in this instance, that would be 0 for Mike, 1 for Kara, 2 for John. And I'll double click here, and I'm simply going to say my list. Well, actually, let's do int results equals int32.parse txt by index.text. All right, and then we're going to say my list dot items dot remove at. All right, remove at results, and we'll try this out. So we'll say let's try to remove 1. Let's try to remove Kara. We'll put that in there. We'll hit delete, and she goes away. So now let's say I want to do 0. Mike goes away. In this case, 0 again because John is now 0. Makes John go away. One more time and it would crash. So I'm not gonna do that. The other one, we can go ahead and click here, and I will simply say my list dot items dot remove, not remove at, but remove text by name dot text, and I'll run it, and I can say Mike delete, and you notice Mike goes away from the list. John delete. Okay. Now a quick word of warning. We can store more than just single word text in a list box. We can store sentences, and we can store entire objects. All right. If we're storing things like sentences and entire objects, deleting by name becomes much more tricky. Okay. Let's say I'm storing an object in there. I'm going to show you how to do that here in a little bit, but let's say I'm storing an object in there. I can't just write whatever it says up here and get the object to be destroyed, because there could be more than one of that wording. Well, there can be anyway, but there can be more than one of that wording with different objects. I have to actually specify the object I want to destroy. So it gets a little bit more tricky, all right? And we're going to take a look at that. Okay. All right, so what I want to do now is I'm going to go ahead and clear some of this stuff up here. I'm going to just remove a lot of this code. We're going to clean some things up so we can look at some other stuff. I'm going to, oh, didn't mean to do that. I'm going to delete these controls and this label, just like this. I'm gonna get an error when I go to run. Oh no, I'm not. Okay, so it didn't save that form unload event. Perfect. Okay. All right. And so now what I want to do is I want to show you how you can delete items from the list. I need a button. By clicking on the items in the list. Alright, so I'll make this say delete again. And what I want to do is be able to click an item in this list and then hit delete and get it to go away. And that'll show us how we can use the selected item index property of this. So I'm going to go ahead and double click on the delete, and I'm going to say my list dot items, dot remove at, all right, my list dot selected index, all right, just like this. Selected index is the index of the item currently selected, and then remove at, obviously, will remove the item at the index I specify. So by selecting it and then hitting the delete button, I will remove something. Now, if I don't select anything and I just hit delete, my program will crash. It's not a fan of that because it's going to say, hey, nothing's selected, can't remove it, -1. Instead, I'm going to have to highlight something, then hit delete, and it goes away. All right. Okay, so that's enough fundamentals about the list box. All right. Now I want to talk about why the list box is really, really cool. Okay, so adding items to it, removing items from it, it's not really a big deal. If you've worked with a collection before, then you've seen all this. This is just a visual component of that. It's not really anything all that crazy. But now I want to talk about adding objects into the list box and then pulling objects back out of the list box. Okay, this adds a lot of power. Okay, this is what makes this control very, very cool. So what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'll just get rid of this stuff right now. I'll get rid of this button. And I'm going to get rid of the items inside here. Okay. Okay. And let me just sort of reshape my form a little bit. What I want to do is I'm going to add a new class. Okay, so I'm going to come up here to Windows Forms Application, right click, add new item. I'm going to add a new class. I'm just going to call this class dog. And for simplicity's sake, I'm just making everything in it public, all right? Because I just want to show you quickly. I don't want to bother with security and things like that. So if you're following along at home, don't make your class this way. Make it like we've made them in the past. I'm just doing this for speed. So I'm going to do public name. Oh, sorry, public string name, public int age, and public string hair color. All right, and then we are only going to have a public string toString. No constructors or anything like that. Stuff is public, so that's fine. And we're simply going to return name plus age dot toString. Okay, so just like that. This is the contents of our class, okay? We have a name, an age, a hair color, and we have a toString method. The toString method is very important, all right? Now, in our previous examples, I passed a string into the list box, all right? And the list box just said, okay, you passed me a string, and now I'm going to show you that string. But in this instance, we're not going to pass a string to a list box. We're going to pass a dog object, and I want to show you this. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a button here. All right. And yeah, this will be fine for now. I'll double click that, and I'm going to say dog, my dog equals new dog, and we'll say my dog dot name equals spot. Oops. Spot. My dog dot age equals 5. My dog dot hair color equals brown. Okay, just like that. And then we are going to say my list dot items dot add my dog. All right. And let's go ahead and see what happens. So we're just hard coding these values because I'm doing it just as an example. So I'm going to hit play. I'm going to click button. I probably should have named that something else. And I get Windows Forms Application 1.dog. All right, so yeah, I did something wrong here. Real quick, I know exactly what I did too. I always do this. I forgot to put override, public override. Remember, toStrings have to have override, so that's my mistake there. Now let's go ahead and run this. All right, sorry about that. and we see spot colon 5. All right. Now this is what's cool. We just passed it a dog object. All right. We just said here's a dog object. The list box was smart enough to say, hey, the dog object is not a string. All right. So what am I going to put in here? I know. Let's go and call the toString method of this dog object, which is why it was important that we had a toString method. All right, that was appropriately overriding the system.object toString method. So it says, hey, let's call the toString method. That'll give us a string, and now we'll know what to do. All right, and so I run it, and I hit the button, and spot gets put in there with the formatting that we used. Okay. Now, if you're looking at this, you're thinking, hey, what about hair color? Right? I just have the name and the age. And you're right, because that's how my toString method is formatted, just to have the name and the age. The hair color is not in there. Here's the cool thing. The hair color is not lost. The list box is storing the object, even though it's only displaying the string. And I can prove this to you because we can pull this back out. So what I'm going to do is I am going to add a new button. We'll call it button 2, how about that? And I'm going to add 3 labels. And actually, I'm going to do one better. We're going to add 3 text boxes. Again, not the greatest of examples here, but it's what we're going to do. And we're going to have txt name, txt age, and txt hair. All right. I'm going to rewrite button 1 to be the name of the dog is now going to equal txt name.text. The age of the dog is now going to be int32.parse txt age.text. And the hair color is going to be txt hair.text. Now we can just dynamically create our dog. So we're going to create a dog with these properties, and we're going to pass the dog in here. Notice the dog is local, so there's no shenanigans. I'm not storing this dog for long term. It's local, which means when we hit this bracket, the dog object goes away. I'm not storing it anywhere. Okay. And now in this button here, and actually one more thing I want to do. In this button, after we've added our dog, I want to say txt name.text equals, I just want to clear these out, txt age.text equals, and txt hair.text equals, there we go. Now they'll be blank, okay? And let's run this, make sure that works. So I'm going to say Ralph is 12, his hair color is red, and we see Ralph in 12. Okay, great. Now what I want to do is I want to prove that the dog is still in there, the whole dog object, not necessarily just the string. So I'm going to double click on my button 2, get myself on a button 2 event handler, and what we're going to do is we're going to cast the selected item as a dog. All right, so I'm going to create a dog object. We'll call it old dog. I don't want to use my dog, all right, just to prove even further that it doesn't exist anymore. We're going to say equals my list dot selected item this time. Not the index of the item, but the item itself. One more thing we have to do, all right, selected item is going to be just an object. As you can see here, it just says object, okay? Selected item is just an object. We need to cast that into a dog, just like that. So this object will be turned into a dog and put into old dog. And then what I'm going to say is I'm going to say txt name.text is going to equal old dog.name. txt age.text equals old dog.age.toString, and txt hair.text equals old dog.hair color. All right. And so what I want to show you is that even though we only see the name and the age, we can still pull the hair color out. It's still storing the object. And so I'll hit play, and we will do Brutus, who is 7. His hair color is black. All right, he gets added. I need to select that item because we're working with a selected item. So I will select Brutus. I will hit this button. We see Brutus, age 7, hair color black. So the hair color got stored inside that list box. All right. That may not seem like much, but that's really cool. Okay, the entire object is stored in that list box. So if you think about that, let's say we have some complex HR system, right, or a payroll system, where we have all of these employees, and not only do we have all these employees, but we have their phone numbers, their addresses, their birth dates, their next of kin, their salary, their social security number, all this stuff, right? We don't want all of that to be in this list box. Maybe we just want their name, the first, middle, last name, all right? Well, we can do that. We can store the objects in the list box, all right, and just use the toString method to only see the name of the employee, all right? And then when we click on it, we can hit like I don't know, more information button or whatever. It pulls the rest of the information out of that object because it's storing the entire object, all right? So pretty neat stuff that we can do with the list box. So absolutely take your time and play around with that. Okay, so that is going to conclude my video on the list box. We talked about what a list box was. Well, I showed you how to add items to a list box. I showed you how to retrieve and remove items from a list box. And I showed you how to add objects to a list box.